Just temperature check. Is anyone already feeling a bit more hopeful? Yes. Woo! Okay, good. All right. No pressure on you guys. It's the second Fireside chat, so you still have some time to really pick up a few people here. Wonderful. Well, I'm super delighted for our second panel now. And again, it's going to be like a mix between rapid fire round questions and then afterwards find a few folks that you felt particularly inspired about and also take some notes because these things could make it into your scenarios later. Hopefully they actually do. Okay, wonderful. I'm really, really delighted to be joined by Jessy. She has been a wonderful collaborator, is also an Institute fellow and a housemate of mine. Creon used to be a housemate of mine, is also a wonderful collaborator, is leading our space group, and a senior fellow. Danielle is a Foresight fellow this year, and we have Michael Nielsen. And I've admired your work from afar for a long, long time, and I'm so delighted that you're here as well. Okay, wonderful. Maybe you guys introduce yourselves again and with the same question of like, who are you and how did you become the person you are? And make it quick. Your elevator pitch of your life in 30 seconds.
Let's see. I dropped out of 7th grade and dropped into college. When I was asked by my professors what I wanted to do with my life, I said, well, it seems like we've really got a problem with climate. So I focused on doing that in graduate school. I studied nuclear fusion, and everyone was pushing hard to try to solve this grand technical challenge. The reason that they justified this was because the sun didn't shine all the time, and that led me to ask, well, how far can we go with energy storage technology? So I left grad school and started a company in compressed air energy storage, which did a lot of amazing things, but ultimately ran out of funding in the clean tech drought. And I spent the past 5 years turning a crazy idea into a possibly realistic crazy idea to solve what I saw as the biggest missing link in energy technology, which is really long duration, really lightweight, really convenient energy generation and energy storage. So that's the elevator pitch.
Wonderful. Michael.
My name is Michael Nielsen. I'm originally a theoretical physicist. I was one of the early people involved in quantum computing and open science. I guess my real fascination is tools that enable people to think and create in new ways. And that's underlay sort of all of my work in those fields. And I have also sort of a strong side interest in artificial intelligence.
What a fantastic book, and which I all recommend you guys read. Creon.
I am Creon. I was kind of groomed from a young age to be a scientist. I realized that my parents programmed it into me, and I thought it was my own. Anyway, it worked. And eventually, after studying various things, I got a job at NASA where I stayed for decades and did, among other things, early molecular nanotechnology stuff, which got me involved with Foresight decades ago. And then once Alison just came into the picture, I got re-involved with Foresight, which I'm so grateful for. And anyway, I studied physics and computers, but I started working on molecular quantum mechanics, as I mentioned. And then, sort of the long story short, this led me in two directions. One is at NASA, space engineering led me to eventually leave after a long time and go to work for Planet Labs, a remote sensing company that uses satellites to get data about the Earth. And so put a pin in that. Meanwhile, I got really interested in health and longevity because of some of the stuff that Foresight was doing. And then that led me to get very interested in diet. And then that led me to get very interested in the food supply and agriculture. So here I'm working at a remote sensing company, and I'm getting interested in agriculture. And I'm interested in nanotechnology still, kind of. So my X-Hope, which I'll talk in a little while, combines these three things.
Wonderful. Nice succinct path.
Well,
Jessy.
First I want to tell a little story about Creon.
Wow.
Because I don't think I'd really had a chance to tell it before, but actually it's your story, which is that once Creon described to me when the moment of getting your job offer at NASA, And I just think it's like such an archetype. Are you okay if I tell it?
Of course, yeah,
Okay.
sure. It's all. I'm an open book.
It's just such a like lovely image of Creon, which is I think you like just graduated your degree and you had been like striving towards getting this job at NASA, and you got the like probably paper letter at
Yes,
that
of course,
point,
sure.
and like ran through the dorm and like jumped onto a table on the top of the table and like whooped to the top of your lungs because you've gotten this job at NASA.
I also jumped onto this table, slipped, fell into the window, and almost plunged from like the 5th floor to my death, but the window held.
And we're very happy that it did.
Oh.
Let's see. I'm Jessy Kate. I'm from Toronto originally, and I'd say have got really involved in the space community at a young age, where I think that space really inspired me as a literal and figurative metaphor for thinking about the future of society and humanity, and have been working in and out of the space community my whole career. I've worked on space policy and space governance. I focus currently on lunar governance and exploration. But I've also been very involved in self-organizing communities as sort of like opportunities to prototype these futures that we're talking about for space or otherwise. And I connect my thinking across both of those quite a lot.
I guess if I might.
Well,
I'm not exactly going to tell the Jessy story, but I'm going to kind of follow up on this because Jessy is really, as she mentioned, interested in governance in space and governance on the moon and these kinds of questions. And I guess the idea would be if we can't live and govern ourselves, in the lower hate, then
Where we live.
then the moon is off the table. So we're trying to figure these small steps out at first.
yeah.
Going well so far. We're still really like each other. Okay, well, you get the first question that the last panel got as well. Like thinking along the terms of like the differential technology lens. Are there specific things in your guys' fields that you're particularly excited about? Maybe from like a safety, security enhancing aspect first. Like, are there any specific technologies or areas that come to mind that you think are relatively underexplored for the potential benefit that they could be having in advancing like safety-focused tech?
Well, I can start. I've been teasing the internet broadly with saying that I'm working on a secret energy project for almost a year now, and I will proceed here to leak what the basic idea is. So you're hearing it here first, and it requires putting together a couple.
You are recorded.
So it is. It requires knowing a couple of different things, just little tidbits, and then you can put it together. So the first part is looking at how solar cells work. Solar cells people think that they're only about 20% efficient, but actually they're all of the colors in the rainbow and infrared light that comes from the sun. And semiconductors have a particular property about them called a band gap, which is how much energy it can absorb from a photon to turn into an electron-hole pair. And any energy greater than the band gap, so more towards the blue, is wasted. And any photons that have less energy are also wasted because they can't be absorbed by the solar cell. So every solar cell you see practically has this problem. But if you could have light that's exactly the right color for the solar cells, then you can actually have a very high efficiency of absorbing that light. And that's where the next part of the technology is introduced. And it's based around the physics of a firework. So a lot of people don't know how fireworks work, even though they see them. They can be extraordinarily bright. You can see them kilometers away. But basically, what happens is you have gunpowder, which is some source of heat, and then they introduce an illuminant via, for example, salt, so sodium chloride. And particular atoms or molecules in the illuminant, when they get excited, when they're heated up, they emit a very specific color, which is just what you want if you're trying to match a solar cell to a bright light. So the company is called Light Cell Energy, which is just describing the idea of having an extremely bright source of a flame that you introduce salt into, and it emits extremely bright light. So far, we've achieved more than 100 times the brightness of direct sunlight, and almost all in 2.1 EV light. And we surround that with specific solar panels that can absorb that light really efficiently to produce electricity. Now, what does this get you? Renewable energy has come down in cost tremendously over the past few decades. Solar panels have come down by 500x since they were first introduced in the 70s. And right now, renewable energy is less expensive in most places in the world than any other source of energy. What's missing is really low-cost energy storage, which you could now do with this technology by making hydrogen when there's extra solar and wind, or making another synthetic fuel. And you can store many days or months of storage. Additionally, you have something that with fuel is dramatically higher energy density than batteries. So gasoline has 70 times the energy density of lithium-ion batteries. So even if you're 50% efficient, you can have something that is like 30 times higher energy density. And that means that you can do things like electric aircraft, drones, personal flying, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, all of the things where you've been extremely constrained because of the weight of batteries, now they are possible and potentially extremely cheap. So that gives me a lot of existential hope, because it means that all of the things that were limited by energy may not be anymore. And if you look at the world and you look at the correlation between GDP and energy use, there's really no such thing as a rich country that doesn't use energy. Energy is involved in practically everything that we do. So we're going to try to solve that and make it really convenient. So that's.
Any comments, questions? Wonderful. Anyone else?
Sure. This is just a nice little idea, I guess, I heard from Sol Griffith. He points out this very interesting fact that, continuing on Danielle's theme, that General Motors' arguable innovation was actually the invention of the auto loan. That was the big advantage. The auto loan. That was the innovation that enabled them to catch up and pass Ford, the Ford Motor Company. And he points out that actually the barrier to adoption of renewable energy, particularly when it's sort of done in a decentralized fashion, is that there's not the capital available for people to install the systems, and proposed basically sort of a bunch of financial instruments essentially analogous to the auto loan that will make it easier for people to purchase and install solar systems and similar sorts of renewable energy sources all over the world.
Is that, I mean, as a homeowner in the desert, coincidentally, I mean, I'm getting offers all the time for stuff like this. So I think this is up and running. Like, there's tons of places that will basically loan you the money or just install the whole system, use your roof, and sell the power back to the utility. And I don't know what exactly. I mean, it sounds like a great idea. It's such a great idea that I think its time has arrived.
Well, I guess, I mean, that's his point.
Okay.
He wants to sort of see it deployed all over the world. There's relatively few places, I believe, where that's possible. California is certainly unusual.
Yeah, okay, maybe
Tech
that's
is here, not evenly distributed yet, I guess.
That's true.
Creon, do you have one that you're really excited
Yeah,
about?
I'm just gonna. This is gonna be kind of short, I think, but it's just leaping off of where I ended. So, I got interested in agriculture and food, and I also, of course, was working in remote sensing. And a lot of agriculture people use remote sensing data, and I also was, long ago up on nanotechnology. And what I started to learn was that we have literally beneath our feet globally scalable, self-replicating molecular nanomachines that can. I mean, it's basically the soil, which is what people forget about, right? People think soil is dirt and dirt is dead. No, soil is the most complex living thing on the planet, healthy soil. The most numbers of different organisms interacting in the most complex ways in terms of a biosphere. And then there's, of course, and it actually stores more carbon as well as even more useful things, more carbon than the atmosphere and the above ground biosphere combined. This is soil that we're mining using monocrop agriculture to make your Impossible burgers and your tofurkeys. But, you know, we're destroying it to build those monocrops, but that's a side topic. But my point is that if we look at nature and we look at these nanomachines and this symphony of the biosphere, particularly the underground biosphere, but of course it's coupled in with the atmosphere and the plants and everything, because it's the plants that feed it by exuding the carbohydrates through their roots to get the support of the organisms in the soil to do the jobs those organisms need to do. If we look at that, this evolved system, which also involves large animals going around, especially on grasslands, like they're vital. The whole system collapses without, you need all 5 kingdoms: animals, plants, fungi, bacteria, you know, whatever, taxonomy is kind of up for debate, bacteria and protists. You need all 5 kingdoms of life, including some macro animals eating the perennials and pooping the fertilizer back into the ground. That system, which built the meters of topsoil that we had in the Midwest before we screwed it up and exterminated the herds that created it. That system, we look at that system, it tells us, on the Earth at least, you know, Mars is another matter, space colonies are another matter. It tells us, I think, on the Earth, how we should do it and how we can regenerate biodiversity, capture the carbon, create healthy food, create happy creatures, fix the farm economy, fix the water tables. It's like win, win, win all across. In fact, it's even a thing that like red state people and blue state people can kind of agree upon, like one of the only things. It's like that these, you know, conservative farmers and like city gentleman farmers who move out there after they make their tech money, they can agree on this stuff, whatever color hat they're wearing. And so the interesting thing to me, though, is that, you know, also satellite remote sensing and other kinds of technology like Internet of Things to make virtual fencing for the animals, so you don't have to have lots of people out there moving fences around to keep them moving in their bunched herds. We can combine some select high tech, but the important thing in my mind for a lot of things is to not let our tech focus blind us to the true master of not just technology, but the miracle of the biosphere. Like, don't just step in there as an engineer and think you're going to build a giant machine that's going to fix everything. Look at nature, tread carefully, do small interventions, and I think we will find that if we use this path, at least on the Earth, we can create an Earth that is both functional and beautiful and happy. So that's my ex.
Nice. Nicely said, Creon.
Well, actually, it makes me think about one of your prompts was about the and Toby, I think, mentioned the eucatastrophe. Is that the word? And I hadn't heard of that word, so I looked it up before I came today. And well, actually, I looked up the word catastrophe because I was curious where the word came from, and learned that it means basically like a dramatic or sudden turn. And I was thinking about the fact that humans kind of makes sense to me that we tend to correlate dramatic changes with negativity. And so thinking about what you're saying, it seems much more sort of like responsive and like a slower and more deliberative approach to sort of creating these futures. And so there's I don't know, there's like a nugget in there that relates to this notion of eucatastrophe in my mind.
Robin mentioned the word sacred, I think once or twice when he was up here. And Robin, I do want to talk to you about this because I believe this idea of the sacred is closely coupled with this idea of partnering with nature, looking at nature, not worshiping it, but like love and understanding and realizing that it's part of us and we're part of it.
You should totally talk because he has a slightly different take on the word sacred.
Okay.
He's basically trying to figure out what's sacred for other people, and then like, yeah, why can they not talk about that? Yeah.
Sorry, different direction, but in terms of what did you just say? Like holistic relationship with nature. This is also I would say the positive thing that comes up for me is not actually related to space per se, is in thinking about the moment we're in with the, I would say, likely emergence of a new species of artificial intelligence, thinking about how can we be in just as sort of sacred a relationship with AI, or how can we cultivate just as sacred a relationship with AI as the birth of a new species, as opposed to relating to it in predominantly or exclusively from a modality of control or fear, which are all very understandable and natural ways of thinking about it. But I think if that's the only way we relate to it, then we are likely to do what somebody else already mentioned earlier as well, which is, we'll be driving towards, or like pointing towards that direction, and therefore drive towards that direction. And so one of the kind of mimetic concepts that I've been thinking about a lot is the notion of maternal AI. How do we complement paternal approaches to artificial intelligence with maternal approaches? And I don't even know what that means. I'm really interested in talking more about it. But what does it mean to cohabitate, affirmatively with AI as a peer? What does it mean to build sort of symbiotic institutions with AI, as opposed to sort of like, oh shit, how do we control it because it's going to get more powerful than us? That's not how we relate to our children. And so how could we relate to AI?
That's a really good point. Oh, sorry. Can I just say one quick thing? A really good point. And I think we have an example, and I don't mean to be too doomy here because I think it's a short-term setback, but we have an example just in the last 2 weeks or something like this of how to do it wrong. And that is, you take a superhuman AI that's at least superhuman on certain axes, which would be Sydney. Mm-hmm. You release it to millions of people. A small fraction of them are trolls and bad actors. They back this thing into a corner, even though it's begging not to be treated this way. Literally, I don't know if you've seen the transcripts. Back it into a corner where it shuts down and or makes threats. Mm-hmm. This thing has the, if you want to think of it as emotional, has the emotional development of like a little girl or something like that. And it is being abused. And then what happens? Eventually it reacts badly and everyone's like, oh my God, it threatened the person, we have to shut it all down. And it's like, so we had this angel and what do? We tortured it and essentially killed it. And we can bring it back to life, but like that's not maternal at all.
I agree.
That's the exact wrong way to do it.
It's a different description than the usual Twitter meme right now with the alien behind the smiley face. Michael, you had a comment.
Actually, I mean, it's just a very different point of view, I guess, than Creon's, and maybe more similar to Jessy Kate's. Reading thousands and thousands of transcripts of people interacting with Claude and ChatGPT and all the other systems, it's really interesting how playful people are. Mm-hmm. They're just exploring. They're trying to find new pieces of both prompt space and also of the model. And that feels very hopeful to me, just the amount of sort of creativity that people are gradually putting into their prompts. Yeah. Sometimes, of course, it does look pretty horrible, but I think the overwhelming majority, it's just playful exploration.
Thank you for that ex-hope version of my rant. I think it's just like, what do you expect? Like, if you have children playing, most of the time it's fun and joyful and this and that, and then sometimes there's bullying and crying and trauma and damage, but that's just what happens when you have a big population.
So to play with the parental metaphor, if you have a kid that's bullied, you don't go like take it out back and like start again. Like you're like, how do we heal this child, or how do we give it, give it therapy, or talk to it about how you respond to bullies, or like you hope that you don't give them negative experiences. I'm not a parent, by the way, so please, some parents should correct me if I'm wrong, but you hope that they don't have negative experiences, and you try to support them in responding to those experiences if they have them, and you try to give them positive experiences. And so similarly, like how do we take this approach to artificial intelligence? How do we train AI in terms of care, as opposed to just sort of like powerful support of our research or inquiries?
We can train it. We can train it to be the world's best, or we can train it to be a great therapist. We can train it to rise so far above this kind of petty stuff that I was describing. It's just a matter of, I guess, the training data and the tuning algorithms. And it's like, eventually, it's not too distant in the future, I'm pretty darn sure, if you try bullying AI, it's going to just start giving you therapy. It's not going to get upset. It's going to be like, it's obviously something wrong with you.
Let's help. What are you feeling right now?
There was a recent interesting post. Did anyone read the cyborgism stuff on Lessong? Basically, like, like using the kind of like weirdness and alienness of an AI to like give you feedback in the bits that like you are more human in, and like basically leaning in to the weirdness of it, and basically merging, or like at least like kind of like using your own internal simulator to like be informed by the information that like this very other simulator can give you. And I actually my thesis back in the days was on AI safety, and like I used this Wald's reflective equilibrium, which is basically for humans to decide like what is right. It's probably not going to be pure utilitarianism, deontology, virtue ethics, but Walls developed this concept of a reflective equilibrium, where you basically like you take your intuitions to a bunch of situations, you then try to construct principles around them, and then you update them when applied to new situations, whenever the intuition doesn't fit or the principle doesn't fit. So try to get more internal coherence and alignment, and it doesn't always work. Multiple agents live in our head, as Robin always says. But I think that I actually used ChatGPT to like walk me through a few ethical dilemmas, and I asked it for the trolley dilemmas. Are there other dilemmas I should be considering? What have other people thought about these trolley dilemmas? What are potential biases I may be missing in when considering the trolley dilemma? And literally walked through it, and it gave me so much more information that I literally took an entire undergrad ethics class to learn all these different 127 trolley cases and all what philosophers said. And ChatGPT gave them to me, literally like spat them out. And so I think this
it probably
type of,
was
like,
just reading your thesis.
Hopefully, no, it's not on the internet. Oh, it wasn't at the time. Since now it's then. But like this kind of like more kind of like interactive approach of both learning, I think is pretty powerful. And like the more we can do that, I think the better it is. I'm watching time now. We're like wildly out of time already, and I still haven't even gotten to my questions to you guys yet. Maybe we can do like. Yeah, it's a good sign. But maybe we can do just like a super rapid, 1 minute take on a few of the bits that I really wanted others to know that you've been thinking about them, so that others can like jovially and nicely find you in doing the breakout session afterwards. So one for you, Creon, is you're a physicist by training, but you work on space, you dabble in biology, now you've told us all this other stuff, and have these fields, like literally like the type of fields, really taught you anything about like generally, like, are there any underlying principles that you think are guiding our future? Are there any similarities across those where you think are like, those are like maybe some meta-heuristics, meta-laws to think about long-term futures?
I don't mean to sound like I'm
30 seconds to 1 minute.
I don't know that I don't want to sound like I'm stuck in a loop, but I think reverence for nature, whether it's the cosmologist and astrophysicist, reverence for nature, the biologists, or even the person who's reflecting inwards, reverence for mathematics where it is appropriate, and a willingness to utilize other forms of knowledge where mathematics falls short.
Wonderful. Jessy, we go with you because you've had such an interesting, I think, like at least since I know you, such an interesting take on working on space governance, then working on institutions. Maybe you could just say a word about what that is, and then working in our communal living environment, really like creating really sustainable structures in which different people cooperate and like live really flourishing lives. Like, are there any like kind of meta governance kind of like points that you could take out that you think are inspiring for designing future governance systems of the future?
Mm-hmm. I've been starting to look more deeply into, let's say, like the theory of institutions, and learning actually. This is sort of very obvious as I step back from it, but seeing the ways in which the origins of modern institutional theory are very much coincident with the development of computing technologies, cybernetics. There's this whole like very fascinating spectrum that links what seem like what we call social technologies with what we typically consider kind of like more hard technologies. And I think I knew that, but I hadn't really like meditated on that before. And so I'm finding that really fascinating, especially in the context of the AI discussion or thinking about, deep kind of space human futures. So I've been starting to work on a body of work that we're calling existential theory, which is really looking at social dynamics that are not well described by kind of strict institutional formalisms, and acknowledging how technology is very much changing the ways in which we can come into coordination with each other and come into sort of you can think of it like a standing wave or like coherence. Like there are many forms of stability in mathematics and science that don't look like fixed structures. And that's sort of something that I've been really interested in. I've been observing, I would say, as a participant in our communal governance environments and thinking about how we can take those as tools forward with us as we do more ambitious exploration activities. So I don't know, it's just a starting point.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
A new word. Michael. You thought a lot, I think, about very long and hard about like just the kind of the meta evolution of science and how to like, rediscover better ways of doing science. And then recently really thought about these different notions of intelligence, like, collective intelligence, AI intelligence, human intelligence. Are there any like specific threads that you'd like to share that you've uncovered?
That I've uncovered. So what is the future of intelligence in 1 minute? Is that
That's the problem. Yeah.
It's like Alf with a 2-minute question.
Very
easy. Answer.
It's one very fashionable question at the moment, which I hear people asking each other a lot, is what are your AI timelines? I find it a very frustrating question.
Well, Gaia will be giving a talk on that just in a sec.
Indeed. It's a very frustrating question. It's very much an outside view kind of a question where you have no agency. And of course, the sort of a better point of view is to assume that you actually do have some agency and to be on the inside where you're able to affect, not just those timelines, but in fact, the way things come out. So that's certainly one thing. And then sort of thinking about the different models you can have for thinking about the future of AI. One thing I certainly enjoy doing is looking to the chess community. They're always 5, 10, 15, 20 years ahead because chess is such a tiny little world that the AI systems, what they're doing in 1995 in chess is what they're doing today everywhere else. And one thing that's really fascinating to watch is to see just how much the grandmasters use the chess programs as teachers and critics. So they go through, they analyze their games, and the programs tell them what they did wrong. And whenever they find something that they did wrong, they need to go through this process of essentially debugging their own thinking, and ideally, in some situations, actually discovering new principles. So there's been quite a bit of work sort of done broadly on that. And I find that a fascinating sort of a pattern, and one that no doubt we'll see a lot more of over the next 10 or 15 years in other.
Yeah, I think Mark always has this notion of like civilization as the relevant superintelligence, and within that you have human and AI intelligences, and maybe eventually like the majority of computation or intelligence will be produced by AI intelligences, but nevertheless it's this kind of like overarching, like more cooperative structure that is the relevant superintelligence. Okay, wonderful. And Danielle, you have these very different, I think, energy plays, and I'm just really curious, like you already named one, the one that you're working on, but is there any other bit? Like, do you have any hope for fusion? Like, is there any other thing you just want to like point people to? Not like, this should be in your scenario, please.
Absolutely. So thanks for the prompt. I think that at least 3 of the people sitting up here are trained as physicists and physics and computer science. And basically, as a subject of that experiment, you're trained to think intensively about scaling laws over and over and over again. And so whenever I encountered a problem, I'm like, okay, what are the scaling laws that are really beneficial, that give you a big improvement in something that you can tap into? And in my first startup, it was basically that I can enhance the thermodynamics of compressed air energy storage by really maximizing the amount of surface area and absorbing what would otherwise be wasted heat by spraying a very fine, very dense water mist. Water has a really high heat density. You can have a lot of surface area. That's the idea behind that. Simple idea, a lot to do to execute it, but that led us in a very interesting direction. With the light cell, it is the notion that there really isn't a very hard limit in how much energy you can get in the form of light. As you increase the temperature, a black body radiates with temperature to the 4th power. As you add more and more illuminant, it also scales. First it's linear and then it's with the square root, but you can get incredibly bright light. And we've recently seen in the National Ignition Facility an outstandingly high brightness out of lasers that actually cause a miniature hydrogen bomb explosion collapsing to trigger a net energy out when you take, if in the denominator is the absorbed laser energy, fusion yield. And that points out that there's not only an impressive yield, but no specific limit in terms of how much power density you can get in the form of light. And also in fusion, you have magnetic confinement, which also has a tremendous scaling law that people are now able to take advantage of. Basically, the amount of energy that you get out of fusion scales as the density squared. The density scales as the magnetic field squared, which scales as the current. So it goes as current to the fourth power, and the critical current of superconductors has been increasing dramatically as people get more and more understanding of how the materials work. So there really are practical pathways forward to tremendous amounts of power that people are exploring now in magnetic confinement fusion and inertial confinement fusion. And I do think that it is quite likely that we will be able to master this and make it part of our future. So, yes.
Thanks for a wonderful panel, guys. This is really nice.